I got room for one person.
We'll talk about it tonight.
Senate will please come to order. Good morning.
Morning.
Today's devotional exercises will be conducted by Reverend Jeff Fuller. He's the pastor of Living Hope Wesleyan Church of Waterbury Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. May I take a selfie? Is that? I'd have to delete it if I did. So this is what I was going to do, is take a selfie and then begin by saying good morning. But we have an understanding that sometimes we are aware that we are leading, but are we always aware that there are those following? Something we've come to terms with in our church is the importance of mentors. Who are you learning from, walking with, and investing in? Learning from, walking with, and investing in, whether it's a pastor, a professing believer, a senator. Who are you learning from, walking with, and investing in? Because sometimes we are so focused on those that we're speaking to that we forget there are those behind us. And following is much greater than belief. They might believe in you, believe in what you're doing, but are they following your credibility, your character? A quick story, it has to be quick. I make the same joke every single time because I'm reminded every single time I only have 3 minutes. So when we're at 2:55, start waving your arms and I'll know to wrap up. But there's a story, Dr. Luke, he was one of the followers of Jesus. He was a medical doctor, and he tells a story of Jesus was speaking, and with such wisdom and supernatural power, and it was a unique situation, and they wanted their friend to hear what this man Jesus had to say, but there was no room for them. The tickets had sold out, the doors were closed, they could not get in, but the friend said, we feel it's so important for our friend to hear this message of Jesus. We will do whatever it takes to get them in to experience this message. And so as the story goes, they broke open the roof and lowered this man down on his mat so he could hear the message of the one that he said he was following, not just the one he said he was believing in. And I just wonder, with the state, if we had those that say they believe in what you are doing, they support you, they pray for you, they encourage you, they criticize you as well, that they might say, hey, we want to hear your heart because we are following the wisdom that you are leading this state. And so whatever it takes, I want to be a part of those that follow Jesus, whatever it takes that we can do to encourage you, to support you, to let you know that you are not just leading us, but you're also investing in us, the great state of Vermont. So I trust this is an encouraging message, also a challenging one, that as you mentor, we still seek to learn from, walk with, and invest in, because together we can do so much more. So if you hear someone that needs to hear their message or have it shared, let us be ones that share with others this truth, this hope, this passionate and compassionate message that we must be serving with great integrity. If you'll allow me, let me pray and dismiss you to your business of the day. God, we thank you that you love us, that you give us great wisdom. We just pray that we would lead well, but Father, that we would learn well as you speak to us and guide us. We say thank you for this time, and it's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Please rise for the pledge if you're able. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any announcements? Seeing none, we have one bill appearing for notice on the calendar, S5. Under Rule 31, S5 will be referred to the Committee on Appropriations, given that it affects the expenditures of the state. We have a joint Senate resolution to read and adopt, JRS 15. Please listen to the reading of the resolution.
JRS 15, Joint Resolution Relating to Weekend Adjournment. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that when the two houses adjourn on Friday, February 24, 2023, it be to meet again no later than Tuesday, February 28, 2023.
Now you've heard the reading of JRS 15. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the resolution? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You've adopted JRS 15. We have one Senate bill for introduction. S93 was introduced by Senators Pertlick and Chittenden. Please listen to the reading of the bill by title only.
S93, an act relating to the sales tax exemption for advanced wood boilers.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Finance. That brings us to the orders of the day. We have continued from postponed action the confirmation of Jennifer L. Barrett as Superior Court Judge for a term from and including September 23rd, 2022 to and including March 31st, 2027, and until a successor is appointed and has qualified. The question is, shall the Senate confirm Judge Jennifer L. Barrett to this position? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the member who made the motion on Friday feels incumbent upon me to speak my piece now, and I will start by saying that I don't plan to make any further motions, just plan to share my thoughts and try to reflect what I've heard from others. And I don't rise to tilt at windmills. I don't rise to denigrate the good work of the Senate Judiciary Committee, but as I received call after call and email after email this weekend from people who just didn't realize how fast this process would go, didn't realize when they could be heard, didn't feel safe or comfortable speaking up personally, but wanted to pass on their feelings. I just couldn't help but wonder how we got here and how the process could look different in the future, and essentially whether or not this particular process had failed Vermonters, and particularly failed an extreme minority of Vermonters who are often struggle to be heard and often face very different disparities and consequences here in the state. And so I just want to offer a few reflections from the letters, some of which you've seen, and the communications that I've had around this appointment. It really led me to the question, what does it mean for us to have this specific piece of the process, the only public opportunity for people to weigh in? In many instances, a judgeship would be a private determination, an appointment by a governor, and there wouldn't necessarily be this moment like we have in Vermont for there to be a public dialogue about the appointment of a judge. And so what is the unique quality of what that offers? But first, I think we do need to step back to the judicial nominating committee process, which is confidential, and I wouldn't want to betray any of that confidentiality. I would just point out two things that seem to be materially relevant that I don't believe are part of that, anything that would break confidentiality. And one is that members who are acting attorneys, currently practicing attorneys who sit on judicial nominating, recuse themselves when they have a case before the person in question as a candidate. And there is a huge backlog in our judicial system right now. So one could suppose that a lot of sitting attorneys in the judicial nominating process right now, or at the time that the nomination was forwarded, had to recuse themselves, and that there were very few sitting attorneys present at judicial nominating at that time. And the second is that sometime after this nomination advanced, the Judicial Nominating Committee actually increased their standard for what it means to forward a candidate. They increased it from qualified to highly qualified, and from expert in their field to preeminent in their field. I don't know if those conditions would have changed the presentation of this nomination that's before us now. But I do have to wonder and hopefully desire that the judicial nominating process, standards may have been different, and the backlog that's very unique to this moment in the court system may have produced a different result than it would have otherwise. And from there, I just have to stop and wonder why so many people reached out to me this weekend who otherwise hadn't come forward in the process. Some didn't know the timing of the process. They didn't know this was being called to question. Some were afraid. Some feared retaliation. Some were just frankly exhausted, and it took an extra push to make them feel like their voice might matter, that this wasn't actually just a pro forma discussion and decision that was before us. And I certainly understand, this is perhaps an outlier. This is a time when the Senate Judiciary Committee was trying to follow the same strong process it always does of letting anyone be heard. But with all of that context and with all of that said, Black Vermonters do feel really unheard in the decision that we're about to make, and that continues to concern me greatly. I don't want to focus on this nominee's character, this nominee's defense of her husband's character. Certainly the vociferous and public nature of her defense of her husband has caused a lot of fear and heartache for Black Vermonters who worry about what that will mean for who she will be on the bench. But what I worry about the most is that some of the elements of her record as a very overzealous prosecutor were not fully examined. One of the first cases that was brought to my attention as I received communications was the D'Onofrio case in 2019. And the D'Onofrio case is one of a woman who went in to a business in Newport to run an errand, had her 4 kids in the car, and came back out, a woman of color, to 2 white women standing in front of her car and saying they were going to call the police and that she couldn't leave. She panicked, which a lot of people of color would do in one of the whitest states in the country, in one of the whitest parts of this state. And she started to drive away, and she ran over one of the women and injured her. And in the process, this was in the AP News and in other forums where those 2 women were able to reconcile and have something of a restorative process during the court proceedings where, Ms. D'Onofrio was able to apologize for her panic and for running over this person, and the other person was actually able to apologize and say she probably shouldn't have scared her and come at her in that way. And then State's Attorney Barrett was pursuing the charge of 2nd-degree attempted murder against Ms. D'Onofrio. That would tear a mother away from her kids. That would, probably put her in jail for many years. The sentence was ultimately reduced to gross negligent operation of a vehicle, and it's probably true that Ms. D'Onofrio is still under supervision of some kind right now. Those are the kinds of cases that I would have wanted to have addressed in the process that I think merit a second look. But, again, I know where we are in the process, and I know that when it comes to the standard of is Judge Jennifer Barrett qualified to continue to hold the role she has per our process, that there's probably not a lot I can do to change people's minds about that question. I just want to be able to say that when we hear that someone's tough on crime, what that means to me is that they're tough on people. They're tough on people who have kids and who have families and who might be deserving of a second chance. And when they're overzealous in their prosecution, that impacts a lot of people's lives. That can mean that they're guilty until proven innocent. That means that you might be pushing for them to be punished in the process rather than be rehabilitated by it. And I have grave concerns about that kind of philosophy, not only being forwarded to the bench now, but with the other open judgeships that exist and the positions that the governor will be appointing in the near future. And I certainly hope that this is illuminating for what happens moving forward. I personally will be voting no on this nomination, and I leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. The process that the Senate Judiciary Committee used and has used on every judge that we have taken up, or magistrate, or member of the Human Rights Commission, whom we are asked to confirm, has always been the same. We ask the person in to discuss their background, why they want that position, etc. We then offer to the public an opportunity to be heard. In this case, we had 3 separate hearings on Judge Barrett. 3, which is highly unusual. If you want better results, then I would suggest that we do the same for every appointment of the gubernatorial nature, and that we have legislative counsel appointed to help committees. A couple of weeks ago, when I wasn't here, you unanimously, 29-0, supported Jennifer Morrison as Commissioner of Public Safety. I didn't hear the debate. I don't know what information was available at the time. I don't know how thoroughly the committee went through it. I don't know how thoroughly the other committees have gone through, for example, the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Commerce. I don't know. We trust the committees. Your Judiciary Committee went through its process. Again, I won't apologize for that, but I do apologize if Vermonters didn't feel comfortable in speaking. A number of people did. I forwarded to every senator the written material provided to the committee. It was exhaustive. I would like to now point up a few things. I did ask Jennifer Barrett about the DeFrano case. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. May I read from her response?
You may. I believe it's D'Onofrio.
Thank you. The case arose when 2 women looked into a vehicle when its car alarm went off in the parking lot of the Vista grocery store. The women noticed 4 children, including an infant, in the car with no adult present. The alarm had been going off for a long time, and the children were upset and crying. One of the women went into the store to find who owned the car, while the other remained outside. One placed a call to the Newport Police Department. The woman stood in front of the car as she waited for law enforcement to arrive to check on the welfare of the children. The operator, owner of the vehicle, came out of the grocery store, got into her car, and started moving forward. The woman standing in front of the car told her that she had to wait for the police. The woman was upset and her voice was raised. The woman then accelerated her car, knocked the woman to the ground, and ran over her with the front wheel. A few minutes later, the car accelerated, Miss D'Onofrio, excuse my pronunciation, accelerated the car again and ran over the woman with the rear wheel. As a result, the woman sustained injuries that were considered life-threatening. At the time, including a possible fracture of the cervical spine at the C2 level and multiple fractures to her pelvis, along with other injuries. She was initially treated at North Country Hospital, but soon after transported to Dr. Hitchcock Trauma Center via Dart helicopter. As a result of the actions, the victim's pelvis was shattered, multiple bone fragments to be displaced into her leg, had to undergo multiple surgeries, and was unable to walk for over 6 months. As state's attorney, I addressed the police in the issue of injury reports and made a determination that the appropriate charge, in view of the egregious facts, was attempted murder. This in light of the eyewitness testimony that stated she struck the victim standing in front of her vehicle, knocking her to the ground and running over her with the front wheels, and rather than stopping, she reaccelerated, ran over her with the rear wheels as well, and then attempted to flee the scene and was stopped by other witnesses. The senator did describe that the charges were brought down. However, the discovery process was started where both sides collected more information about the case, and during the course of discovery, David Slay, who was the the defendant's attorney, provided me information about her mental health and trauma history. Based on that information provided by Attorney Slay, D'Onofrio and I agreed to resolve the case for less severe charge. It's called a plea agreement. Surprisingly, I've been advised that allegations were made during my Senate confirmation that my initial charging decision was made due to Ms. Donafaro's race. I say surprisingly because I had no idea of her racial background when I filed the charges. There was nothing in the police affidavit, crash report, arrest country form, or anything else that was otherwise provided at the time charging to determine what her race was. Further, her out-of-state record check listed her race as white. The victim and her family report that they did not believe the outcome of the case was fair. They believed the outcome was unfair and didn't account for the offense and lifelong injuries the victim suffered. The victim strongly opposed the resolution in court at the sentencing hearing, so she may have apologized or may have offered some other solace, but this record completely is different from the one we just heard. And for that, I am sorry. Secondly, your Committee on Judiciary heard a great deal of testimony. There was no testimony that during her period as a state's attorney in Orleans County or other counties as a deputy, that she was doing anything untold or unwarranted. Her charging decisions are those of a state's attorney. She ran on a platform of holding offenders accountable. In Orleans County, there is no plea charge discretion in the diversion program, unlike Chittenden County and some other counties where you have that. One of the things that the House Judiciary Committee is working on, jointly with Senate Judiciary, is how to make a more uniform system of diversion in the state. Your Justice Oversight Committee spent a great deal of time on that this summer. So now we come down to our decision as individuals, and I can only speak for myself. I did not hear anything about an overzealous prosecutor that was troubling to me, in that the governor has a choice of appointing people. Has he appointed too many prosecutors? I probably agree with that. But it's his choice. And frankly, I never heard a word about that in any campaign in the last 4 years for governor. Never a word. Wonder why it never came up. Secondly, or thirdly, or fifthly, there is the case of her husband. And she was not married to him at the time. And I've read the Zulo case. As a matter of fact, we wrote bills based on the Zulo case. It was horrific. But in your judgment, should we not vote for someone who is found qualified by the Judicial Nominating Board, found qualified by the governor's staff in their review and the governor in his appointment, and given what we had for information based on her, at the time, boyfriend, now husband's behavior? That's an individual choice I can't make for anyone. I think anyone can make that decision on their own. But for me, my choice was to, yes, vote to confirm Judge Barrett, and I'll live with that. And I will vote again today to confirm Judge Barrett. And I think I've said enough. I was disappointed in some of the information we received this week, and we need to improve our process to make sure people are aware of how to get their voices heard. But I can tell you, there was a lot of Vermonters that got their voices heard on this one. Thank you.
Senator from Orange.
Mr. President, not long ago, this morning, we recited the words liberty and justice for all. That's a tough standard and a tough bar to meet. The debate that we've had on Friday and today is, when we think of those words and we look at our collective achievement as citizens, it bubbles up, and it bubbles up again, that we don't always meet that standard of liberty and justice for all. And senators and our neighbors, Vermonters, read those words and recite those words, and they themselves know that we have yet to achieve the standard of liberty and justice for all. And I don't want to use the words we resort to, but the chair of the Judiciary Committee has said that, and I put it in different words, that they work their tails off to operate within the guardrails of their job. And they do it out of good conscience, and they do the best they can. And we try to operate within the guardrails of appointments and committees to investigate and whatever. At the same time that it bubbles up within each of us that we do not have a country in which there is liberty and justice for all. And discussions like this are unsettling, and they cause resentments amongst, within myself. I'm angry at myself for not doing more, and I'm, on the other hand, want to cooperate to do more in a way that doesn't annoy everybody. And that's the dilemma that we face as senators, and the dilemma that our countrymen face in light of what we see before our very eyes. I hope, as we move through this, that we come out this morning better than when we went into this morning and when we went into last Friday. But no one in this Senate, I believe, thinks we have liberty and justice for all in this country. And we have collectively work to do. And we're not going to solve it on an individual appointment. This is what happens when things bubble up. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been in this building for 25 years now, and I think this is the first time that I'm not sure I can vote. This is the first time I've heard a challenge to a committee. We have a process, and yes, the process could be improved. I mean, I don't think any of us hires an investigator and does a deep dive into the background of anybody we confirm or don't confirm. The Judiciary Committee did their job. If there were people who felt they weren't heard, then a member of this body who heard from those people could have gone to Judiciary and gotten them heard. There's nothing I've heard that says that people were deliberately excluded. And I can't do anything right now about whether or not people are afraid. A lot of people just don't feel comfortable coming up to this building, no matter their color, their economic status. It's just the way it is. I read all the documents, both sent by the senator from Bennington and by the senator from Chittenden Southeast. I sat there, I read them all. And especially the documents coming from the senator from Chittenden. And I was saying, okay, maybe, where there's some smoke, there's fire. But then it struck me that, and the word that's come to me is kangaroo court. What I didn't hear is the candidates, is the oral presentation that the committee heard. I didn't get to hear the candidate's response. I only heard the prosecution. I didn't get to hear the defense. And to be, asked to make a decision, only having heard actually one side. I heard, I've read some attorneys that said, yes, she was very qualified, but not having heard her response, I feel very uncomfortable being asked to make that decision. We put that responsibility in the hands of the committee of jurisdiction. My philosophy has been, and I can only think of one exception, I've voted against it, was to rely on that committee and to accept their decision. And I will say I have lost some sleep this weekend going through this, but I think at this point, I just I feel like I've only gotten one side of the story, and I don't feel I have a right to condemn someone without her having a chance to defend herself, and that makes me uncomfortable.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to thank both my colleague from Bennington and my colleague from Chittenden Southeast. In the latter case, I'd like to thank the senator for not proposing further delay. And I will put it like this. Personally, as your pro tem, I don't come to you today asking you to accept Judge Barrett's confirmation or to reject it. I do ask that you vote on it, and I will explain my thinking. So the Judiciary Committee has a process, as the senator from Bennington pointed out, long-standing and designed to secure a lot of input. In this case, we delayed in committee twice to allow critics of the judge more time to bring their case forward. I would say this is far and away more time and attention than we've given any judicial nominee since I've been here on the Judiciary Committee. With that said, we came to the floor after your calendar had announced the confirmation for the requisite amount of time, again, to allow people to come forward. When we got to the floor, I thought the senator from Chittenden Southeast made a good presentation for a delay. And as you remember, we had a little scrum over there and we talked about it. And that's the heart of this body, talking about it and working forward. So we reached an agreement, which was to postpone to a date certain today. And that single legislative day was actually 3 calendar days. And the senator did her work. She found more input from more people who were passionate about this. That came forward to us over the weekend. And all of us had a chance to read that. The senator from Bennington did his job and more by forwarding the entire corpus that we had received in the Judiciary Committee. So at this point, I personally believe we have heard from all quarters. Would critics and supporters like more time? They would. The supporters of Judge Barrett were passionate as well. So I think everybody would like more time. It would be easier on all of us to have a delay because you don't have to confront it right now. The way I would put it is this: we've had 3 delays so far. So I will call for a roll call vote if there's a motion on delay. I hope that there won't be. Otherwise, we'll have a roll call vote on Judge Barrett's confirmation. Either way, we will have a roll call vote today, and that is as it should be. So I ask only that senators speak to their own conscience and what they understand to be the case. If you don't feel you have enough information personally to confirm Jennifer Barrett, you can vote not to confirm her. But sending it back to a committee that has already done its work and doesn't want the nomination back isn't the answer. Neither is delay on the floor. This will not get easier. So if I can offer that advice, that is my path forward, that we hear from whoever we have yet to hear from, and then we all look inside ourselves and take the vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee?
Senator from Bennington is interrogator, is the reporter of the nominee.
In your reading of the response from Judge Barrett on the D'Onofrio case, did she indicate that the defender was David Slay?
Yes, she did.
And on Friday, my recollection is that you read a statement from David Slay in strong support of her appointment. I just wanted to confirm what was said Friday with the description today. And so I wanted to confirm my memory that, in fact, a person who spoke and wrote very passionately in support was also involved in one of the cases that has been a topic of discussion.
Yes, Senator from Caledonia is correct, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I was going to make a motion to delay, but after having heard from the pro tem and the chair of the committee, I won't make that motion, but I will just speak about my thoughts on this process, particularly from as a member of the Judicial Retention Committee. I'm serving my 5th year on the Judicial Retention Committee, and during that time, I've reviewed nearly 40 judges who've come before the legislature for their 6-year retention process. It is a similar process to the nomination process. It's certainly not perfect. Talking to one of my colleagues on that committee, we should be using more data to make our decisions. But it is a process that allows the legislature to come back and review judges. And I can tell you, once a judge is appointed, it is very difficult to remove them from the bench. In my first year in the Senate, we had a judge that I did not think should be retained. And I was the sole vote against that judge in the Judicial Retention Committee. And then that judge was retained on the General Assembly floor. It is something that I say all the time to my committee mates on judicial retention, that I believe part of our process is to ensure that the judiciary has the respect and the trust of all Vermonters. And that's the standard we should be using to review judges as to whether they should be retained. And this year we're reviewing actually the 5 Vermont Supreme, I wish it was the the Vermont Supreme Court justices. And I hold that even stronger because they are the justices that determine all of the appeals and reviews. I also, as no one will be surprised, consider it really important that we that we have a diverse judiciary. We do not have nearly enough women, and we have almost no judges of color, just a couple. And I find that to be really disturbing. So I'm in this position right now where I feel a little uncomfortable, feeling like I can't vote for a woman who's just been appointed as a to be a judge, because we need more women on the bench. We need their perspective. We need their life experience. And we also need Vermonters to trust them when they're on the bench. And I fear that with Ms. Barrett, that all Vermonters may not trust her on the bench because of this. On Friday, I was prepared to vote yes for her. And then we got a delay and got more information, and now I don't feel comfortable voting for her. I don't want to hold her accountable for the actions of her husband. That is unfair and that is sexist. And women are asked to apologize far too often for the bad behavior of men. It is not okay. And that was one of the main reasons I was going to vote for her on Friday. But what we heard over the weekend was actually about her and her actions and the discomfort of some Vermonters about the things that she has done. And that is what has raised my concern, and the reason that today, given how hard it is to remove a judge once they become a judge, I just don't feel like we have enough information. I had hoped that our Judiciary Committee would take this back into consideration and give us more time and more information. But if that's not going to be the case, then I will have to vote no today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, and just a reminder, a roll call had been requested in the prior session by the senator from Chittenden Southeast, and that is still pending. Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I've heard this morning was that there is concern about Judge Barrett, principally because Black Vermonters don't trust her. Let me suggest that there is no such thing as Black Vermonters who speak with a single voice. If you think about things that are racist, that's racist. Some Black Vermonters don't trust her, and perhaps some do. One of the allegations underlying this is that there's somehow disparate treatment in what she did as a prosecutor and what she may do as a judge. But what she did as a prosecutor, despite the volume of materials that I received over the weekend, And looking through the records that the Judiciary Committee provided, and looking at some of the video, in fact, that was relevant to her husband, not to her, I didn't see any evidence of abject discrimination on her part. And she's the one who's being sought for confirmation here, not her husband. And I agree with the senator from Addison that blaming her for what her husband may have done is not proper. I'm concerned that we are, in many cases, making decisions on the basis of people who say that they were not aware of and did not participate in the process. Many people did participate in the process. And to say that Vermonters who are Black were unaware and totally oblivious to what we do here and to what happens in our committees and to what is being presented and what's being publicized, I think is not necessarily correct. And I disagree with that. This is a difficult decision because the issue of trust for a judge is extremely important. And there are some people, some of whom may be Black, some of them may be white, some of them may be something else, who may distrust her. But that's a different issue. But as we look at what the committee did, the committee looked at the facts that it had. We've looked further at those things that have emerged in terms of comments after the committee has met. I have not seen anything that's emerged in the documents that I've received over the weekend that really provides any additional information that the committee didn't effectively have when it made its decision. Thank you, Mr. President.
Pending question is, shall the Senate confirm the appointment of Jennifer L. Barrett of Newport, Vermont as Superior Court Judge for a term from and including September 23rd, 2022 to and including March 31st, 2027 and until a successor is appointed and has qualified? Are you ready for the question? If so, the Secretary shall commence to call the roll.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
Yes.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
Yes.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
Yes.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Julich.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
No.
Senator Harrison.
Yes.
Senator Hashim.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza.
Yes.
Senator McCormick.
No.
Senator Norris.
Yes.
Senator Pershlet.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
No.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
Yes.
Senator Behovsky.
Yes.
Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Weeks.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
Yes.
Senator Williams.
Yes.
Senator Renner.
No.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yea, 26. Those voting nay, 4. And you have confirmed the appointment of Jennifer L. Barrett as Superior Court Judge. We now have for consideration third reading of H-145. I believe there is an amendment in the calendar offered by Senator Kitchell and others prior to third reading. For the report of the amendment, I'd like to recognize the senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Appropriations Committee has identified two areas where we need to make technical corrections. The 1 through 5 instance of amendment relate to the funding for the Vermont Pension Investment commission, and the money to support the work of the commission was not budgeted. And so what you're seeing is the money for the VPIC commission that is apportioned across teachers, state employees, and municipal pension fund management. The 6th and 7th instance of amendment are simply taking the language related to childcare loan repayment assistance and moving it into session law, not in statute, where it more appropriately should be placed in session law. Those are the technical amendments that the committee would like to have made, and we hope this body will concur.
You've heard the report of the amendment by Senator from Caledonia. The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by Senator from Caledonia and others? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and we've amended the bill as offered by the Senator from Caledonia and others. It is my understanding there is another amendment to be offered. It is being distributed at the moment. It's offered by Senators Vihovsky and Renner and is being handed out to the senators. And once that has been handed out, I'll recognize the Senator from Chittenden Central for her offering of the amendment. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members of the Appropriations Committee, for your hard work on this important issue and for your investment in a more sustainable emergency housing system in the future. I very much appreciate the focus on vulnerable Vermonters and would assert that simply being homeless makes you a vulnerable Vermonter. Those experiencing homelessness are more likely to experience incarceration, hospitalization, and poor health outcomes. And keeping employment, caring for oneself, and jumping through the many hoops of living in poverty is difficult and in many instances impossible without housing. The downstream impacts, both monetary and to our already overburdened systems, our packed emergency departments, crisis levels in corrections and mental health, I believe will be detrimented by putting 750 people back out onto the streets, even for just a month. It may well end up costing us more than these $2.5 million to deal with the impacts of homelessness on these systems and the future costs that may compound themselves. My amendment restores the $2.5 million to the General Housing Emergency Fund so that we may house all people experiencing homelessness through the end of June. It's my strong belief that this is an important investment and that we can do both, house people now and invest in more sustainable future options. Thank you.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Appropriations Committee took testimony on the amendment, and we recognize the issues that are associated with the decision that we made relative to the split between emergency housing for the non-vulnerable and allocating funds to increase our capacity for emergency shelter. There is no question that there are costs, and there are costs that are experienced in a variety of ways. We hear from communities that there are costs associated with housing so many people in these temporary in motels, that there's increased cost to law enforcement, there are increased costs in a variety of ways. The other part, I want to make it clear, the program that is shutting down the end of March is a federally funded program that allowed us to provide this level of assistance. Now, even under this, we were not housing everyone who needed it. We were doing, as I said in my testimony earlier, first come, first serve. So what we were finding in certain areas that, in fact, our most vulnerable were not able to get housing because there weren't sufficient rooms. And a single adult without any of the, who is not disabled, was getting the housing. So we have less than a perfect system right now. We did sort of review our deliberations on why we made the split and phasing out this program, getting us through into warm weather. And we do believe that the balance that we struck is the proper one, and therefore do not support this amendment. Thank you.
The question is, Senator from Madison.
May I inquire of the chair of the Appropriations Committee?
The senator from Caledonia is inquired.
Thank you, Mr. President. The budget adjustment bill includes how much funding for the temporary housing?
$5 million.
$5 million. So this would add $2.5 million. That was what was unclear. And then in the budget adjustment, does it also put money into permanent housing?
Yes, Mr. President, it does. We have $25 million for VHCB for permanent housing. In addition to that, we have 2.5 for the expansion and bringing more emergency housing units online. We also have money for Vermont for the housing improvement program, an additional $5 million for that. And we also included $9 million more for the missing middle home ownership program, so that applications in queue could be addressed. And then we also are appropriating in total, 4.8 was already in the budget, but an additional 13 million for over 18 million to provide temporary emergency housing for the vulnerable population through the end of the fiscal year.
Great. So the intent with a lot of that permanent housing would be that hopefully people would not be in a situation where they need temporary housing because they could hopefully move into more permanent housing. Is that at least part of the intent?
That, Mr. President, was part of the intent, although we, as I indicated, we had a housing and a homeless issue before COVID. And so even with all the investments that we've made, and at this point, with the additional funding, we will have spent $200 million, as I've said, since the beginning of the pandemic on motel rooms, 320 toward permanent housing. We know we have to bring more permanent housing online. There'll be more money as we're considering our 24 budget as well. But to say that within the budget adjustment and the 24 budget, that we will have addressed the whole entire issue of homelessness, I certainly could not say that that would be the case. We want to make progress. We believe that we have to start making these investments. This is really one-time money because of the additional revenues that have flowed into the state. I'm sure that there might be advocates who would want to continue this level of assistance. But I caution members of the Senate that in the 24 budget, we actually are dealing with some very significant funding pressures, including level funding of our entire mental health treatment system, and a level funding as proposed in the administration's budget, level funding for reimbursement to our residential care facilities that provide housing as well, and care. So we are trying to be very judicious and strike the right balance. Thank you.
Excellent. That was more information than I asked for, but thank you, Mr. President.
I'd like to recognize the senator from Chittenden North.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the amendment to add $2.5 million to the budget amendment. It's important to me that we provide shelter for people without homes, not just for physical safety, but also for emotional well-being. Champlain Housing Trust purchased a hotel in Essex Town in 2020. Living in those 68 apartments are formerly homeless persons. On any given day, weather dependent, one can find residents of Susan's Place gathered inside a gazebo that's located on the property. They're swapping stories, complaining about the weather, and just generally bonding as humans do. The camaraderie of those residents at Susan's Place reminds me that if we don't extend funding through the end of the fiscal year, we're forcing a disconnect of human beings who need not just shelter, but the emotional support that they have found in such temporary housing situations. Thank you.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to indicate that the Appropriations Committee reviewed this amendment, and our vote to not support it was on a vote of 6-0-1. And the other point that I would make is that what we have also heard is that there has been an increase in the purchase price. Many of the motels that historically have been bought up and rehabbed and provide the very kind of housing that's just been described because of the revenue flow that the rental rooms generate. We have heard from VHCB that in fact the purchase price of these properties has increased as well. So we are actually exacerbating a situation, making it more difficult to acquire the units to do exactly what we feel we need to do, and that is bring more units online. Thank you.
Question is, Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The analogy that comes to mind for me on this question is first aid. If a person is obese and diabetic, that's a worse problem than the fact that the person has cut himself. You want to take care of the underlying problem rather than just deal with the symptoms or with the smaller, more immediate problem. But the immediacy of the immediate problem sometimes puts it ahead of the big basic problem. You take care of arterial bleeding before you take care of obesity, because the arterial bleeding has to be taken care of now. I agree with the idea that on homelessness, we need to deal with the basic problems rather than the expedience of housing homeless people in motels. However, the immediate problem is homeless people without shelter. And the first aid is the motels. And there are people who are going to be exposed to the elements this winter. The winter's not over. So I rarely vote against a committee. And I certainly don't vote against the Appropriations Committee because of my great respect for that committee and the awesome work they have to do that they're charged with. But in this case, I will support the amendment.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you. I would just like to make a point of clarification that the budget adjustment continues its benefit for everyone, assuming that they can get a room, because there aren't enough rooms in all areas of the state, is through May 31st. We are way past what we would view as winter time, and that was part of our discussion, that we did not want to end this benefit at this point of the year or this season. So I just wanted to be very clear that what we're talking about is the difference between the end of May, 1st of June, and the end of June. Thank you.
The question is, shall the Senate amend H-145 as offered by the senators from Chittenden Central and Chittenden North as appearing on your desk? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to, the nays appear to have it. The nays do have it, and you have not further amended the bill. Are there any other amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill by title.
H-145, an act relating to fiscal year 2023 budget adjustments.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have passed H145. That completes yours of the day. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I would move that the Senate stand in adjournment until Wednesday
At 1.
at 1, the 22nd. Thank you.
The senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand in adjournment until Wednesday, February 22nd at 1 p.m. Are you ready for the question? Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before you call the question, I'm wondering if I might announce the Senate Education will meet at 1:30 today.
I believe the senator from Chittenden Central may have indicated telepathically that pending announcements, the Senate would stand in adjournment until Wednesday, February 22nd at 1 p.m. Are there any other announcements? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Health and Welfare will meet at the Fall Gap.
Senator from Orleans.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. If the Ag Committee could, Senate Ag, I'd like to get the members there as quick as possible. We have a group waiting for us.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Natural has witnesses waiting. If we can meet as quickly as possible, as well.
Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate GovOps will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Essex.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate institutions today will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance will meet at 1:30.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Judiciary will meet at 11:15.
Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Economic Development will also meet as quickly as possible.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Democratic Caucus will meet at 12:15 sharp. If we could, in the lounge, please bring your lunch. If you would like to observe it, the link is on the legislative website. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand adjournment until Wednesday, February 22nd at 1 p.m. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand adjournment until Wednesday at 1 p.m., February 22nd.